focus for now, a century-old mystery and the curse of the pharaohs may have been finally solved. And revealing the answers is reportedly the tomb of a pharaoh. In fact, Egypt is calling the discovery of the tomb of the mysterious pharaoh the biggest archaeological find of a century.
For 100 years, the world has been looking at the wrong face. The golden mask photographed on every textbook cover, every museum poster, every postcard of ancient Egypt. It isn't him. The real face of Tutankhamun was sealed on the inside of the mask, pressed against his skin. Carved from a second layer of gold no one knew existed, and the inscriptions carved around it were written to be read by something that isn't human. A new scan finally pierced the metal. What it pulled out of the darkness has left even the most experienced Egyptologists searching for an answer they cannot find. The hidden face. The international research team gathered inside the Controlled Conservation Laboratory at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The mask sat on a custom support, lit from carefully measured angles, surrounded by equipment that would have looked like science fiction to Howard Carter a century earlier. 3 systems were prepared: a portable X-ray fluorescence scanner to read the chemistry of the surface, a high-resolution computed tomography system to map the internal structure, and neutron scanning, a form of radiation that pierces solid metal without harming it, returning detail far beyond what conventional X-rays can produce. Neutron beams interact with atomic nuclei in ways X-rays cannot. They can reveal materials and structures that traditional imaging walks right past. The technicians activated the neutron system. The beams passed through the gold and into the interior, into the section that rests directly against the face of the mummy, into a space that had stayed in absolute darkness for more than 3,000 years. The screen began to fill with shapes that should not have been there. 2 distinct elements appeared on the inner surface. The first was a second thin layer of gold shaped into the contours of a specific human face, not flat, not generic, a jawline, cheekbones, a brow line modeled with stunning precision, a death mask hiding inside, a death mask, a second face concealed beneath the first. The technicians watching the monitors fell silent. Nothing in the surviving documentation of the mask had prepared them for this. Every prior X-ray, every photographic survey, every published study had treated the interior as a smooth, structural backing, a blank sheet of gold whose only job was to support the famous face on the outside. The blank sheet had a face of its own, and it had been there since the day the burial chamber was sealed. The second element was a series of extremely fine inscriptions carved across the inner gold, invisible to the naked eye. Never recorded in any report from the moment Carter unwrapped the mummy in 1925 until the second this scan was performed.
On November 26, 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter broke into that long-forgotten tomb to make the greatest archaeological discovery of all time.
For 100 years, scholars walked past them, photographed around them, studied the object that contained them, and never suspected they were there. Specialists in ancient Egyptian language identified them as funerary formulas tied to the reign of Tutankhamun, a shortened form of his throne name reserved for restricted ritual contexts, a passage invoking passage through the eastern horizon, a symbol of rebirth under the god Amun. These inscriptions sit on the inside, in direct contact with the linen-wrapped face of the king. Once the mask was placed and the burial sealed, no person, no priest, no official could ever see them. Buried within the burial, hidden inside what was already meant to remain hidden forever. The face that doesn't match. Compare the 2 faces. The face on the outside, the one billions of people have seen, does not match the other surviving images of Tutankhamun. Statues and reliefs created during his actual lifetime show a narrower jaw, less pronounced cheekbones, a different eye shape, a different nose line, a different proportion between the forehead and the chin. The face on the mask is broader, more angular, almost feminine in certain proportions. It does not line up with any known portrait of him. Egyptian funerary art followed strict conventions when depicting the features of a king, and this face breaks those conventions in measurable ways. Side-by-side digital comparisons published in the years after the scan made the discrepancy impossible to dismiss. The outer face belongs to someone else. Then researchers measured the hidden interface and compared its contours to anatomical data taken from Tutankhamun's actual skull, recovered through earlier full-body CT examinations of the mummy. The match was unmistakable.
An Egyptian mummy who's over 2,000 years old heading into a CT scan in Los Angeles. Summer Decker, a 3D imaging technician, scanned 2 mummies and took over 50,000 images to help get a glimpse into their lives.
The jawline, the brow angle, the curvature of the cheekbones all align with the skeletal structure of Tutankhamun. The inner layer was modeled from his real face. Whoever made it had access to the body itself. They worked from the king as he actually looked, not from the official portraiture the public was meant to remember. The world has been looking at the wrong face this entire time. The real one was sealed against his skin, where no one was ever supposed to find it. 2 layers, same object, 2 different identities. Before we go deeper, if a hidden face beneath a king's mask is the kind of history you want more of, hit subscribe. Because what comes next is the name that was erased to make room for his. The cartouche that was someone else's. The outer face is not the only thing that doesn't belong to Tutankhamun. X-ray fluorescence revealed something even the most cautious researchers were not prepared for. The gold used for the face is not the same gold used for the headdress. 2 different alloys, 2 different recipes, sitting on the same object. The proportions of silver and copper vary systematically between the 2 regions. Under controlled laboratory lighting, each section reflects light differently. The trained eye can pick out the seam once it knows where to look. This is the chemical signature of 2 materials from different sources, or 2 production processes separated by time. A boundary line running through gold that the world has always treated as a single seamless surface. For a royal funerary object made for one specific king, this should not exist. Ancient Egyptian royal workshops kept rigid control over their materials, especially for objects of the highest status. Every gram of gold passing through a pharaoh's workshop was logged, weighed, and accounted for. The face and the headdress were never made together. They came from 2 separate phases, possibly from 2 separate masks. Then there are the ears. The mask has pierced earlobes. Across the entire tradition of ancient Egyptian royal art, pierced ears appear on depictions of women and children. They do not appear on official portraits of adult pharaohs, not on Ramses, not on Seti, not on Thutmose. Adult kings were never depicted this way in formal funerary art, and piercing solid gold does not happen by accident. Someone deliberately punched those holes, then later attempted to disguise them with small gold discs. The discs did not fully conceal the openings. The question is who they were originally meant for. A queen wears earrings. A child, prince, wears earrings. A pharaoh in his prime, depicted for eternity in solemn funerary art, does not. The area around the cartouche, the oval frame containing Tutankhamun's official throne name, responds to light differently from the surrounding metal.
Discovered 2 cartouches believed to offer powerful protection from evil spirits. 7 hieroglyphs spell out Tutankhamun's name.
This is not gradual wear. It is localized, confined to the inscription zone. The metal in that area was reworked before the current name was carved into it. A previous name was polished away to make room for a new one, a name that belonged to someone else. Consider the political ground this mask was made on. Tutankhamun took the throne around 1332 BCE as a child, probably no older than 9, inheriting power at the tail end of one of the most chaotic chapters in Egyptian history, the Amarna period. Under his predecessor Akhenaten, widely believed to be his father or close relative, Egypt had been turned upside down. The traditional gods were thrown aside. The capital was uprooted and rebuilt at a brand new city called Amarna. Royal workshops were forced to adopt an entirely different artistic style to match the new regime. When Akhenaten died, all of it had to be violently reversed. The boy king inherited a kingdom desperate to erase 20 years of disruption. He even changed his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun to signal a return to the god Amun. The capital moved back to Thebes. Royal workshops were running around the clock, reassigning a flood of objects to support the transition. Everything that had been made for the heretical regime had to be either destroyed or quietly converted into something acceptable to the restored priesthood. Gold was the easiest material to convert. A name could be polished off and replaced. A face could be reshaped. An object intended for one royal head could be made to fit another. And then there is Nefertiti, Akhenaten's wife, one of the most powerful queens in all of Egyptian history. Around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, she vanishes from the official record. No confirmed evidence of her death. No record explaining where she went. She simply walks off the edge of history. After this moment, a new ruler appears under the name Nefer-Nefer-Uaten. The name shares its opening elements with an extended royal title Nefertiti had used earlier. Egyptologists Aidan Dodson and James Allen have proposed that these two identities are the same person. Nefertiti ruling in her own right under a new royal name, a queen who became a king. If that proposal is correct, Nefer-Nefer-Uaten would have died or vanished only a short time before the boy Tutankhamun took the throne. Her funeral preparations would have already been underway. Her funerary objects would have already been in production. The most expensive of those objects, the gold mask intended to carry her into the afterlife, would have been close to finished when whatever happened to her happened. And then a child king died unexpectedly with no royal mask of his own. And a workshop in panic mode would have been forced to make a decision very quickly. Repurpose what already existed. Erase the old name, reshape the inner gold to match the boy's actual face. Carve a new outer face on top. In an era where rulers were rewritten this freely, royal workshops did the same to their objects. Cartouches were erased and recarved. Statues were reshaped. Items prepared for one ruler were quietly reassigned to another. This was not the exception. It was the rule. Look at what the mask is telling us. Two different gold alloys, pierced ears that belong on a woman or a child. A reworked inscription zone, where an older name was scrubbed off the metal, an outer face that does not match Tutankhamun, and an inner face that does. The mask was not built for him. It was built for someone else first. Someone whose name was carved into that gold before his, then. Erased to make room. The tomb that shouldn't exist. The space the mask was found inside fits the same pattern. When Carter cracked open the chamber, labeled KV-62 in 1922, his team realized immediately that something was off. The tomb looked nothing like the other royal burials in the Valley of the Kings. The main burial chamber, the room holding the sarcophagus and the body, was unusually small, cramped. Pharaohs typically spent decades planning and building their tombs, beginning the work the moment they took the throne. The result was always sprawling, long corridors, connected chambers, architectural complexes designed with deliberate intention, built by armies of workers across a generation. KV-62 was not that. Carter himself remarked it looked less like the eternal resting place of a king and more like a noble's tomb, hastily upgraded for a royal burial. The wall paintings deepened the problem. In other royal tombs from this same era, the murals were executed by master, artisans working slowly enough to control every brushstroke. Inside KV-62, some lines wobble in ways that cannot be blamed on age. Analysis of the paint layers shows the artist kept working before the base layer had fully dried. A shortcut, almost never seen under normal royal conditions. Whoever painted these walls was racing the clock. The grave goods raise even more red flags. On several royal objects, the cartouche showed signs of tampering. Under magnification, early conservation teams documented disturbed surface areas around Tutankhamun's name, inconsistent with natural wear. Someone had erased an earlier name and carved his over the top, the same pattern visible on the mask itself. The gilded shrines, the canopic chest, several of the Shabti figures, all carried the same fingerprint. A name that had been there before. A name that was no longer allowed to be there. Even the sarcophagus tells the story. The massive granite outer coffin was too large for the chamber. Workers had to chip away portions of its edges to wedge it through the doorway. The rough scrape marks they left behind are still visible today. Evidence of frantic adjustments no royal builder would ever have planned in advance. The inner coffins fit even more poorly. The middle coffin sat at an awkward angle inside the outer. The lid had been damaged in handling and patched with crude resin. Every layer of the burial showed the same signature. Whoever assembled this tomb did not have time to do it properly. The accepted explanation is that Tutankhamun died young, suddenly and without warning. His officials had to scramble. Funeral preparations that should have taken 70 days were compressed into whatever time they had. Workers cut corners, artists rushed, objects were borrowed, repurposed, and quietly relabeled to make do. This explanation fits almost everything inside KV-62, with one massive exception. The mask itself shows zero trace of that urgency. CT imaging confirmed it is not a single uniform mass of gold. It is built from multiple components, joined by welds positioned at structural stress points. These joints distribute tension evenly across the entire object, preventing it from separating over time. The metal thickness varies in different regions in a way that controls flexibility and weight. This is not crude work. This is engineering knowledge that requires deep understanding of how materials behave under stress, heat, and gravity over centuries. The kind of understanding that comes from decades of refinement inside a master workshop, not from a few weeks of panic carving. Inside the false beard, CT imaging exposed a hidden internal support tube. It secures the beard to the chin while completely concealing the connection from external view. No other known funerary object from this period contains anything like it. Purely functional. Invisible until modern scanning made it detectable. A solution designed by someone solving a long-term structural problem, not by someone improvising under deadline. The headdress contains Egyptian blue, a synthetic pigment created by heating copper, calcium, and silicon dioxide at carefully controlled temperatures between 850 and 1000 degrees Celsius, the earliest known synthetic pigment in human history. Producing it requires specific chemical knowledge and precise thermal control, not a skill anyone stumbles into. The eyes, formed from obsidian and quartz, are carved with a precision that produces lifelike depth. Modern jewelers who have examined the cuts say the level of pressure and angle control would be difficult to reproduce consistently, even with today's tools. They describe the work as belonging to a single master craftsman, the kind of artisan whose entire career might produce only a handful of objects at this level. A workshop in panic mode does not produce the single most refined piece of metalwork to survive from the ancient world. It cannot. The mask was not made during the rush. It was made earlier, for someone else, then handed to the panicked workshop with one final job: make it fit the boy. The inscriptions meant for no one. Return to the inscriptions hiding inside. The inscriptions on the outside of the mask, the 12-line formula running across the shoulders and chest, face outward. Scholars have studied them for over a century. Chapter 1, 151, B of the Book of the Dead, a funerary text designed to guide the soul through the dangers of the afterlife. According to ancient Egyptian funerary logic, these outer inscriptions were positioned to be read by divine beings as the king's soul moved on. That fits everything we understand about Egyptian funerary text. Text exists to be seen, to be read, to be transmitted to a recipient, human or divine. The inscriptions inside the mask cannot be seen. They cannot be read. Once the mask was sealed against the king's face and the burial closed, no living being would ever encounter them again. They serve no communicative function in any conventional sense. And yet someone made the deliberate choice to put them there, in direct physical contact with the face of the dead king, executed with the highest level of precision found anywhere on the entire object, inside a space that no one would ever be able to verify until the arrival of 21st century technology. Whoever carved them did so with absolute certainty that no human eye ever would lay on their work. Someone who carved with the absolute confidence that their work was meant only for the dead, or for the gods, or for something stranger than either. Think about what that means about the person holding the carving tool. They knew. They understood that the moment the mask was placed against the king's face, their work would disappear from human knowledge forever. They did it anyway. They did it with more care than they applied to the formula on the outer chest, the one designed for divine eyes. The inscriptions inside were not made for show. They were not made for theology in any form Egyptology has previously documented. They were made because someone believed they had to be there, that something would receive them, that something was waiting. Across the entire body of known ancient Egyptian funerary artifacts examined to date, no other object has been documented with a comparable feature. Ritual inscriptions placed inside, in direct contact with the body, in a position that can never be read after sealing. If this were common practice, there would be precedent. There is none. If it is an exception, it demands a reason. None of the existing explanations account for it. Not reuse, not haste, not the chaos of the Amarna period. Because what was placed inside is not a trace left by lack of time. It is the result of deliberate planning, executed with the highest skill in a location no one was ever meant to see. The outer face was for the public, for the priests, for the world of the living. The inner face was for him. The inscriptions were for whatever he was meant to meet on the other side. The 2014 near disaster. In 2014, the iconic beard of the golden mask broke off, while staff at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo were adjusting the lighting system on its display mount, a routine maintenance task, until something slipped and one of the most famous artifacts on the planet was suddenly in pieces. The incident was later confirmed in official reports.
The most prized pieces of ancient Egyptian culture, and one of the most famous. So it came as a shock to many when reports emerged that the burial mask's beard had come off. And instead of the careful restoration needed, museum authorities just glued it back on. Conservation experts have now had time to examine the mask of Tutankhamun. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiques appointed German Christian Ekman to assess the damage.
What followed has been pieced together through staff testimony and conservation records. Instead of stopping the process and contacting professional conservators, a decision was made on the spot. Industrial epoxy, a substance designed for permanent mechanical bonds in heavy applications, was used to reattach the beard.
The deattachment and reattachment of the beard. And the second one, the second very important component is a comprehensive study of the material they use for manufacture, as well as the complete manufacturing technique.
Adhesive hardened fast, leaving behind a thick visible residue around the joint at the chin. Crooked, glaring, permanently obvious to anyone who got close enough to look. When the news went public in early 2015, the response from the international archaeological community was swift and brutal. Conservator Christian Ekman from the Romer und Pelizaeus Museum was brought in to lead the restoration. The technical challenge was enormous. The epoxy had bonded tightly to ancient gold, coated with a patina that had formed over thousands of years. Any mechanical force strong enough to remove the adhesive risked scratching or warping the underlying surface. Ekman and his team chose another path. They used natural beeswax, gently heated to a controlled temperature, combined with specialized tools to lift the adhesive away, layer by layer. The work moved slowly, measured in hours per centimeter. Every motion was logged. Every fragment of removed epoxy was photographed. As they pushed closer to the underlying structure, they began to grasp something no prior assessment had revealed. The mask was far more fragile than anyone had imagined. In certain areas, the gold layer was so thin that even slight, uncontrolled pressure during adhesive removal could have caused permanent damage. Damage no amount of modern conservation could ever undo. The restoration was ultimately successful. The mask was returned to display condition. The 2014 incident pushed the Egyptian Museum to overhaul its handling protocols and reignited global conservation discussions across multiple professional conferences. But the incident raises a question that does not appear in any official report. If the adhesive removal had damaged the inner regions, the surface that rests against the face of the mummy, the interior where the second face, and the hidden inscriptions sat unknown until neutron scanning was performed, that information would have vanished without anyone ever knowing it had existed. The hidden inner face had survived for more than 3,000 years untouched. In a few hours in 2014, it could have been destroyed by a decision made in minutes, leaving no trace it had ever been there. No researcher would have known to look for what had been lost. No comparison would ever have been possible between the inner contours and Tutankhamun's actual skull. The inscriptions, executed with the highest precision found anywhere on the mask, would have been ground away by the same epoxy that disfigured the chin. The world came within hours of losing the secret without ever learning it was there. The darkness that remains. The mask is back on display now. Tourists file past it every day. Cameras flash against the gold. The outer face stares out at the world the way it has for 100 years. Calm, perfect, unreadable. Children press against the glass. Tour guides recite the same paragraph they have recited for decades. The face that does not belong to him continues its long afterlife as the most famous image of a king it was never made for. Behind it, in the space the public will never see, the second face still presses against the linen wrapping of a king who died at 19. The inscriptions still sit in absolute darkness against his skin. They have never been read aloud. They were never meant to be. The purpose they were carved for has not been classified by Egyptology. They are not decorations. They are not instructional in any conventional sense. They are not mistakes. They were placed there deliberately by hands that knew no human eye would ever find them. So, what was the mask actually made for? Was it commissioned for Nefertiti, ruling under the name Neferwaten, before her sudden disappearance forced the workshop to scrub her name and reshape the gold for a child king who was never supposed to need it this soon? Or was there a hidden ritual purpose, carried in silence by the priests who placed the inscriptions inside and lost forever when the tomb was sealed? Drop your theory in the comments. If this is the kind of mystery you want more of, subscribe and stay close. Because the next discovery on this channel is the artifact that suggests the priests of Amun were hiding more than one identity inside the gold of their kings. Howard Carter believed the mask had given up everything it had to give the day he unwrapped it in 1925. He was wrong. 3,000 years of darkness have only just begun to lift. And how many other sealed objects, in how many other museums, are still holding their secrets exactly the way this one did?